And we are live. Hello everyone. We're going to be doing the second part of the Rollo stream. I'm joined by ST. Do you want to say hello again?
Hello there.
Yeah, and Settler's Lament hasn't shown up yet. He might pop in at some point. I don't know. One thing I'd like to warn again is that he's quite vulgar. So if you've got kids in the room, get them out of here. This is definitely not one for the kids. And for anybody who's scandalised by like sexual discussions. Because he gets quite visceral in parts. So we were originally at 2 hours, 3 minutes and 33 seconds last time. Right? Or something like that, right?
Yes.
So we'll begin again there. And we will turn him up. I think everyone can see this, right? They should be able to. It shows up in the OBS. Yeah. We will go up to 0.5. Nah, maybe 0.25, right? Just to start off with. Probably not used to listening to his voice yet, so it's probably a good idea to like get it kind of slower. And we'll start. This is immediately ST in like stuff that's pretty worth responding to, if I remember correctly. So it may be worth like paying proper attention before like not much of a warm up, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
For wife and kids, and yet when the cops show up or when the shit hits the fan, now it's not so much, and now it's not just about it's not about contractual marriage, it's also about covenant marriage, because you thought you had a covenant marriage. That's what most guys will say. When I talked to Dr. Everett Piper, who was on Pat Campbell's show, he used to be I think he used to be the principal or the provost, I can't remember, of
I remember this bit.
Wesleyan University in Oklahoma. And very religious guy, very stereotypical, archetypal, evangelical, Southern Christian guy, right? And of the opinion, well, that will never happen to me. Divorce is off the table. Why? Well, my wife says, and we both agree. It doesn't matter what you agree, because the state says divorce is always on the table. So contractually, it's always on the table. But then guys will default to it and say, well, our conviction says we can't get divorced unless there's like marital infidelity or sexual immorality or whatever. Okay, well, there's a loophole there first, but second of all, it's like, well, that's great until the circumstances get so bad that the covenant side of your marriage crumbles, and now it's based on the contract side.
Well, you see, even Jesus was demolishing the divorce laws that were in the Levitical covenant, right? So, like, sure, she might be able to go to a lawyer and get civilly divorced, but she still won't be covenantally divorced. You'd just be single, and you can't remarry. Right, like, just, like, if any guy is actually repeating this over and over again as if, like, a civil divorce-style situation cannot happen because of this religious precept, particularly in the times we're living in, you're being stupid. I mean, it really depends on the kind of woman you marry. That's why we were really strongly emphasizing in the last episode virtue, because that reduces the ability for licentiousness and things like that to intervene. Don't treat religious marriage as if it's some sort of like hidey hole where you don't have to be virtuous and keep the other person interested, or like keep that person going. Yeah,
it's kind of the sexual prosperity gospel, right? Where it's kind of like, oh, as long as we're Christian enough, nothing bad can happen to us. Well, no, that's not the case.
The whole point of marriage is that it's a challenge. You are sanctified by your partner because often she can just be really annoying. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's as simple as that. Like, that's the point. It's considered to be a vocation, just like being a monk is a vocation, or just like being a priest is a vocation. Where those guys can't, they don't even have the consolation of the goods of sex, or the goods of children, right? But it's a different difficulty. Like, while they're struggling with lust, you're struggling with your wife and with your children and with like paying the bills, right? Whereas the monk, I mean, he's struggling against the evil one. Like, don't, like, if any guys are labouring under this delusion that somehow you're going to be safe because, like, you got married in a church and are sacramentally married, which is, it's an ontological change. You will still be bound to your wife, provided she doesn't, and even if she does fornicate, you can only put her out of your bed, right? You're still two people in one flesh, right? Don't make that think that won't change, like, the way the other person behaves, if they decide to. Like, a woman can still fornicate outside of marriage, and so can you.
Yeah. I think the important part here is that, and this is something the manosphere really stands and falls with, is kind of the marriage situation in Western countries is one of their biggest points, and it's completely justified. I mean, the way the divorce courts work in Western countries is not fair. You know, like when the man loses half the assets and also has to provide for the wife for her lifestyle because she had a different lifestyle when she was married with him.
I mean, if he should have to. I mean, in Britain, as far as I understand, it's mostly for kids that you have to take care of, right? But the woman has access to that money; she can use it how she wants, which is a loophole in the system, which probably wasn't as much of a problem when these laws were introduced. I think it was in 1840 or around there, right? But now, where you have like a complete lack of an understanding of virtue at all whatsoever, this is a real problem because you're essentially handing the woman the money and saying, go nuts. Right, she doesn't even have to feed the kids, in theory, right? I mean, she can be taken to court for like not being a good guardian, right? But there's no, like that takes some pretty serious circumstances.
Yeah, and the point he's making is a good one. So I think we do want to kind of support him here in the sense of, as you already pointed out, that there's a complete difference between a worldly marriage and a heavenly marriage. And I think the questions that, like the additional stressor that the current situation puts on you, where you have to consider both things, basically marriage as one, a contract, which is the worldly marriage, and the worldly marriage does not understand love at all. Like the courts do not understand love in any way.
Well, they understand coom. They understand coom and they understand money. Right, like let's be frank here. And I mean, even like a lot of contemporary Christians don't understand the love of marriage because they just think it's like, feelings. No, of course not. Like, oh, we married for love. Oh, did you? Right, then why are you divorced 7 years later? Like, did you will the good? Like, I doubt that many of these people willed the good of their wife so hard that they married them. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it may be the case for some of them. That's great. I mean, if you did that, that's amazing. But I just have a real suspicion that most people don't have that going through their minds when they're walking up the aisle.
Yeah. And then the other side is the marriage that you have in heaven, where it's kind of you're getting bound together in heaven as you're bound together on earth, right? When you're married. This is something my father kind of lamented when I became a Catholic.
I don't know.
He said, "You guys aren't even like married for your life. You're married after that as well."
No, I mean, Christ himself does actually say, those who are in heaven, they're not given in marriage as the angels, right? So I'm not hot on my sacramental theology myself, but I don't know about that one. I don't know. I'm not certain.
As far as I understand it, once you're married, you will be married in eternity.
You'll certainly be married for as long as like the two of you live, right? Like pretty much regardless of the situation, aside from like annulments, right? And even those are usually like a lot of the time. They're like, I don't know if they'd stand up a lot of the time, because I mean it really depends on the priest that's processing them, right? And you have to argue, well, the person didn't know what they were getting into when they were taking the sacrament, and therefore the sacrament is invalid, right? And to be fair, nowadays there's a huge number of cases of that because people simply don't understand what love is, right? They don't know what they're getting into. They think, oh, we'll just like have like feelings and like have kids and smile and like own a house, right? Or they'll have like this really nihilistic look, and it's like, they don't understand, right? Because no one's taught them, no one's sat them down and explained what love actually is to them. Right. Okay, we've spent a lot of time on this point. I think we should probably continue with what he's saying.
Yeah.
So, I think guys think that their religion and their faith and everything else is sort of this insurance program or this insurance policy against divorce or insurance policy against suffering the worst of sort of the divorce machine, like as Rich Cooper would call it. And I wish I could say it was, but I have to look at it from a functional perspective. I would very much love to say that, well, my wife will never divorce me because I've been married for...
I mean, it's in the Bible. I mean, it happens to Hosea. Like, if these people want to run around and say, oh, like my special little like sweetheart, she'd never do such a thing, right? That's ignorance of Scripture.
Yes.
Going on 25 years now. And, we have our faith and we have our religion ourselves, but I'm not going to say that Well, it'll never happen because I've seen too many people. I've seen pastors, I've known pastors who have gone through a divorce with 4 kids, and their wife turned 39 and she wanted to get her crazy on and go bang guys, and left him and the kids. Well, she'll get hers. God will take punishment on her, and maybe he did. But the fact still remains that it's not an insurance policy. Your conviction and your investment is not an insurance policy. So all this stuff about when we talk about responsibility versus authority, that's...
In fact, I'd argue that, like, the Christian marriage ideal, right, like, is one of the most hardcore ascetic practices that you can ever have. Because, I mean, specifically Catholic, right? Because you can't dissolve marriages outside of annulment in this life, right? It is heretical to do so. And that binds people together for life, regardless of what happens. When you've done it, you've done it, right? Protestantism, you can get divorced. The Copts, they can get divorces. Famously, the Eastern Orthodox can do 2 or 3, right? Catholics, you can't, right? Like, any other practices besides that is contrary to Jesus' direct words, right? I mean, obviously, Islam is famous for having, you can have divorces in there. Judaism, you can have divorces in there. I can't speak for the Hindu religions, but as far as I know, from Father John Harden, Catholicism has the most hardcore view on of marriage of any religion in existence. Right?
I just looked it up pro forma, and you're still married in heaven.
Oh, are you? Okay, cool.
I mean, it's just like a small Google search, but from what I can gather, yes.
It makes sense on an intuitive level as well, right?
Yeah, this is a decision you make literally for eternity.
Okay. So George, to answer George Washington, what Jesus says is that you can put away your wife if she's fornicating, right? You can put away your wife, and that doesn't mean divorce, right? The Copts misinterpret this and say it's divorce. Granted, I don't think they're bound to the same ecumenical councils as us, right? Although it's still an error. It just means that you're not obliged to provide sex to her, as we talked about in the last thing. You can put her out of your bed. I don't know if it goes as far as material things, like providing food or things like that. I don't know about that, but I do know that you're not obliged to sleep with her in any way if she cheats on you, or vice versa for that matter.
You have to eliminate the moralistic religious side of that to really fully appreciate and understand the mechanics involved in that.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, one thing we have to make clear is that the spiritual reality, which is more real than the physical reality, I might add, is still manifest there, but you do have to take account of the concrete brass tacks.
One thing I mentioned in the book as well is that if you are religious, if you have conviction that it says, this is how I live my life, I want a virgin bride, I'm gonna live this orthodox way, I'm not gonna touch my wiener, I'm gonna just live like a monastic monk in the 6th century, I don't know, whatever it is, until God drops my perfect little wife on the doorstep, and then maybe then I'll have a wife and kids.
I mean, if you're expecting your wife to be perfect, perhaps you should look in the mirror and ask if you deserve a perfect wife.
Yeah.
Like, you should be... Go on. Yeah, like if you've gone in the confessional and said the sins that you've said, and you've given the appropriate detail, there is no way you should expect a perfect wife, because you know for a fact that you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Like, and this goes from like Saint Francis of Assisi through to the worst sinner, through to Judas, right? Like, we have all committed horrendous sins. Like, we have committed actions that infinitely offend God, the absolute being, through destroying the being which He has constituted us with, right? If you're expecting like a perfect little wife, in a literal sense or in a metaphorical sense, right? You're living in La La Land.
Whatever your convictions are.
I mean, I think the perfect wife thing, it's just a bit of hyperbole on his part.
Yeah, of course
I think
it is.
The point he makes there, the rest, I dislike quite a bit, because the idea of, okay, I'm going to, let's say, go away from actively the romantic or maybe dating sphere of the West, and only go or pursue a woman if I believe that God has directed me and brought me and a woman together. It is not something that might be the best thing for every person to do, but I would say that it is the best thing for at least some people to do, especially if you're thinking about the idea of vocations, where it's kind of, okay, is my vocation to be a father and to have a family, or is my vocation to maybe live in lifelong celibacy? And if you're unsure between those two, many people know that they want their vocation to be a father, and in that case, you might do good looking for the mother to that. But you're not sure about that. If you say, oh, I don't even know, maybe I just want to be celibate my whole life, then in that case, of course, you might just say, okay, I will pursue the life of celibacy, and then if God puts a woman in my way, then I will steer the course, and then I will direct the course.
Yeah, also, it turns out the chat is correcting you, ST, on the marriage thing. Because it turns out like it ends with someone's death. Yeah, I mean, as I thought, right? Like, I responded. I actually quoted Jesus when he said that, and yeah, like that turns out to be the case. And second of all, yeah, like obviously he's not being literal. That's why I said metaphorical, right? Like like you could not, like, you're not going to marry the Virgin Mary, right? Okay.
Yes. I don't know. The thing I found just in my 2-minute Google search was also a quote from Christ, where he asks the woman, which of your 7 spouses will you be married to in heaven? And the take from that was that you are married to a spouse in heaven. So concerning the comment I'm
he was
seeing,
asking a rhetorical question. It's like when Jesus goes, like, who do you think I am that I have the authority to forgive sins? Right, like he's answering, like, well, obviously he's saying he's God, right? That's what he's implying by the question. And likewise, he's saying, well, which one do you think you're married to? Well, the answer is none of them, right? As he answers the Sadducees.
Yes. But the take I read there was that she's married to none of them because she's an adulteress, not because it's it's not the norm. So if she weren't an adulteress, she would be married to one of them.
Look, like whatever, right? We can check this later on. There's enough streams.
Yeah.
My point in this book is not to convince you to give it all up. Not at all. If you're an atheist, my point in this book is not to convert you to any religion whatsoever. All this is an objective look at the under the hood. To look at, I just work here, man. It is an objective look at the mechanics or machinations, let's just say, underneath the.
Like, I'm sorry, I doubt I could call it. Like, I've never read this book, but I've read his other work, and I doubt I call it objective because I don't think anybody's ever written an objective book ever. Okay, maybe with the exception of, like, the first manuscripts of the scriptures, right? Like, that might be an exception, but no.
I would call a Lego tutorial objective.
Lego.
Yes.
Lego. Okay. I'll bear that in mind.
The code in the matrix. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we have these things? Why do we have these convictions in the first place when it comes to intersexual dynamics? And how does that play out into a larger meta scale? Because now, once we get past that and the personal side of it, again, it's micro to macro. Well, how does that affect us in a tribal sense, right? Well, your church, technically, that would be a tribe, or your family, your church, maybe as your township, your country, what else, whatever. And now in a global sense, because we're globalized everything. What does that do? I'm looking at the underneath. I'm looking at how the gears mesh together. So if you're like, people have asked me this, and I want to clarify this now because people will say, well, are you bashing Christianity in this? Not at all. Not at all. What about Islam? What about, no, I'm not bashing religion whatsoever. I'm laying out, that was my intent anyways. I'm sure people will read it that way. That's not my intent.
I mean, of course, that's not his intent, but I do kind of find the Brett Weinstein people reading the scriptures and saying it's all revolutionary. While it's kind of flattering on the face of it, it kind of destroys the entire meaning of them, which is very annoying. Right? I mean, incredibly annoying, and it may not be in the intention, but it sure has the result.
I think this is also something that kind of, if you have a point of confusion that you say, this is not my intent, but you can identify that easily. I hope that he also identifies the same point in the book and also spells out in the book that is not his intent. Otherwise, I would say it's basically
I mean,
authoritarian negligence.
yeah, I mean, I think we can see from the stream that he's the kind of person to phrase things very bluntly. And so I have a suspicion this carries forth to the book, and if I remember his original book well enough, I think he has instances where he does that as well. Right, like I listened through his books, because what I would do is that when I'd have spare time in my second year of uni, right, between, you know, mucking around and drinking and studying for my degree, I'd go, there's like a local forest, right? A local nature reserve, and I'd stick an audiobook on and I'd have a walk, because I like having a walk, and I couldn't go for a swim like I'd used to, because I used to in my first year go like swim like 6-8 hours a week, right? And I'd walk around the forest listening through the books, and that's how I finished Rational. Actually, I finished Rational Mail Volume 1, walking between the town I lived in, I suppose it's technically a city, to a local village, across a bunch of fishing ponds, and it was like 5 miles there and back. Right, and I finished it that way, and it was great. It was a lovely experience. I must have finished about 20-25 books that way, actually. Can recommend. Yeah, you might not retain everything, but it's still a good thing to do.
I hope you stay whatever religion you are. I hope this
I'm giving people recommendations for stuff they should do with their spare time if they're not seeing friends.
In the taking up on the discussion we just had in the chat, Anicedemus asks, "What is your understanding of the term?" Quote objective unquote, and I think that's a reaction to my saying that the Lego tutorial is an objective text. I mean, it's technically not a text because there's no words in the Lego tutorial, but that is kind of part of why I would say that this is objective.
Well, I mean, I would say absolute 100% correspondence to reality, right? Like that would be my contention of what I mean by objective, right? Like. And he's not going to get that from his own data because, as we know, academic statistics are completely bought and have been for 60 years. So,
I would say I get this idea of objective, but I think like the word for that I would use for that is true. It's like, you know, this is a true statement, and then there's objective statements, and there's subjective statements. And objective statements are just statements reduced of every kind of subjective filter. So
yeah, but I doubt he means that. Like, I doubt he means that. He's like saying, like, okay, I'm producing for you the truth, right? Like, as far as he can reckon it, right? So, I mean, what else would be the point of his book?
No, I don't think so. I think he means objective in the sense I just laid out, because this is, of course, something that is very common in the modern world, where you say, "Oh, I know that I know nothing," because of course you have to say that because deep down you know it, even though you might not believe it. I know that I know nothing, but I'm objective, and that is as good as it gets. And then of course you can kind of
and then you contradict yourself by saying that you know nothing yet you know something.
Yeah, but you can kind of slither around that way to make statements that other people should listen to you because you have the objective facts, right? And at the same time you have the way out where you say, well, this was as good as it gets, but this wasn't good enough. So I would say that
you're just giving me flashbacks because I've been reading the complete works of Plato over the last 3 weeks, right? Let's see, 3 weeks, nearly 4 weeks, right? And Socrates does this constantly, and it's really, really annoying. It's like, I know nothing. Proceeds to pull out all of this wisdom, like, from nowhere. Right? It's like, I mean, like, I find Socrates as a character incredibly annoying. Right? Like, I can understand why the Athenians tried to exile him. Right? Like, completely understand. And I think a lot of his the accusations against him were somewhat true, judging by his own dialogues, right? But, like, I suppose you do have to kind of play that game. Right, and he's just doing that. It's like, oh, I know nothing. It's like, yeah, right, you know nothing. But that's probably just me.
I would say, in the end, the I know nothing thing, it can be very powerful if you're using it, for example, from a Christian framework where you know that, like, all knowledge rests with God, and all you're having is like a specter of a piece of dust of the whole divinity of knowledge and insight into the divine nature. Then you can really say, I know nothing, not as a, let's say, mathematical statement where you literally know zero, but that compared to the knowledge that is out there, you know nothing. But there's also this kind of it is a very easy point of sophistry that lends itself to doing what many people do, and which Rollo might be also doing in
I mean,
doing
it's
statements.
societal convention, right? But if we're gonna like establish a new order, we should probably get rid of that one. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
Reinforces your
that's
belief. If you are an atheist, I hope you don't convert to whatever it is. Like, stick to whatever. If you make that decision, or if you have some sort of epiphany, or if you want to abandon your religion, or
Also, this is something that Rollo's probably not thinking of, but I really hate that people think secularism is some sort of mid-neutral point when it really isn't. Like, no, it's got its own assumptions.
Yeah, secularism is its own religion.
Yeah, it's like it's idolatry in its purest form, basically.
or if you want to accept religion, that's not
It's evolved Hermeticism. It's kind of secularism is to Hermeticism what Protestantism is to Catholicism. So not even, I guess Protestantism isn't evolved Catholicism, but it's kind of building upon Catholicism using some of its aspects and then kind of meshing it all together. Secularism is like that to atheism, to Hermeticism.
Sorry, I'm responding to something in the comment section. I'll unpause it.
Okay.
Sorry, my math brain is switching on.
I'm looking at the comment section. Maybe.
I hope you do whatever you're going to do, and you use these as tools to inform your decisions in whatever it is that you're doing. But that's not what it's about. Because like a lot of atheists hit me up and they said, "Well, I'm an atheist. So this is not really for me." No, it's most definitely for you. I'm a religious guy. No, this is also very much for you too. I said this in the book, is that if you have religious convictions in this day and age, and your only option for sex and reproduction is marriage, you need this book. You need the information in this book.
Or you could just not have sex.
An atheist,
I don't
you
think
think,
that is
Pardon?
in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that is in any way, shape, or form related to that statement. But I would like to comment on that in like a few sentences of it later.
Sure.
that kind of crap right here, and you're an atheist and you still believe in the soulmate myth, or you believe in if you're an atheist and you get one-itis for a girl, or you're simping for some girl on OnlyFans, you need this book.
Simping for a woman on OnlyFans, man. Oh. Yeah, you do. You probably. I mean, I don't know if I'd throw you at Rollo, but I'd certainly throw you something.
So, I try to be as general as possible, and of course, I'm also sometimes not as generous as I would like to be with him. But I could see the first idea being, if you're religious and I hate the way he phrases, where he says your only option to a relationship is marriage and one sexual partner, right? But I could give him the benefit of the doubt here and say, okay, maybe his book contains warning, like we just said, where you have to look out between the secular marriage before the courts, that is a very different thing than the marriage you're having in church, that these have to be approached different, that there's no, let's say that the thing that is happening in church, the thing that is actually about loving each other, has nothing to do with a prenuptial agreement, that kind of jazz. But then he goes over to saying, if you're an atheist and you still believe in the soulmate myth, and you're simping for a girl on OnlyFans, and thinking this, I hope these are like 3 separate topics in the book, because otherwise there's huge problems in there. I mean, the idea of a soulmate, of course, I think there's like very wrong ideas about it. The one that is maybe the most harmful is kind of, oh, there's a person for you out there somewhere. And like, if that were the truth, it's like you and one other person are made for each other, and then you will be brought together in the future. And you you do hope that God is doing a lot more in your life than you might otherwise assume, because otherwise that's just a romantic dystopia. But of course, soulmate in its more traditional sense is just something you develop with a person, where you say, okay, we are getting closer and closer and closer to each other, to an intimacy, to a point where we are opening so much to each other that the lowest part of our being, our soul, like almost inner parts, are now connected with one another, and that is the point where me and my wife are soulmates. And of course, this is not a myth. This is something you want to achieve in marriage, even though it is hard. Even though marriage, for the most part, is a fight.
Man,
But yeah, these are kind of different fights, different topics, and I hope that he is not, let's say, referring to one chapter in his book, because if he is, then he's just telling you whatever, like nothing good.
yeah, 1 second, I'm just having like an autistic mathematic discussion in the chat.
Okay, then I'll expand on that a bit. So the third part, he says, if you're an atheist and you're still simping for a girl on OnlyFans, and I find that interesting that he says this specifically for atheists, because it makes it sound as if, so especially with a soulmate myth, it makes it sound as if he's making a case of, okay, so you're an atheist, but you believe in something that is like a bastardized, and in the best scenario, in the most charitable scenario, a bastardized version of something that comes from the religious community. So if you want to shed all religion, you also have to shed the soulmate myth. But then the case is making simping for girls on OnlyFans. I don't know why he has to modify that statement by saying atheist. It's like, does he think that there's certain religions for whom it is okay to simp for a girl on OnlyFans? I mean, what is up with that?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just arguing about the finitude of numbers. being autistic in the chat. There is an end to the numbers, guys. It just moves one whenever you get to another number.
It's not because of it's religiously or whatever. I'm not converting anybody. I hope I'm not. I don't want to do that. That wasn't my point. My point was just to do an objective.
I mean, he's trying to convert to something, and that's red pill thinking. So.
Yeah, that like the one thing he's saying is, I hope I'm not converting anybody to anything. But then, of course, he says you need this book, you need the knowledge in this book. And of course, like we had it last time, where he says it's not an ideology, it's a praxology. Well, then if a praxology is so intrinsically aligned with reality, so necessary, that everybody needs to read this book, then I would say like there is some ideology in there as well. And that is, of course, the point where you say, okay, you are trying to convert us to something. And also because it is kind of shining through every now and then, I think that he is some shade of Christian. So I find it kind of telling that he says, but I do not want to convert you, because that means it's some off-brand, not real Christianity, because, of course, proselytizing to people, spreading the word, spreading the message, is something that is intrinsic to Christianity, because Christians believe Christianity is the truth, the closest to the truth you can get. All other truths are founded upon it. So, of course, giving Christianity to others is the most central way in which you can help them. With any other form of help, even a praxology of how you're being better in your love life and better equipped to things like modern divorce courts, all rest upon being a Christian first.
Okay, let's continue then. I'm getting bored of the finite numbers discussion, man. This is about like sex and marriage and stuff, man. I don't want to talk about like the finitude of numbers.
Yeah, but on the other hand, at least the guys who are doing the finite discussion, number discussion with you, are never going to have to think about things like sex and marriage. So.
Oh no, right?
To look at what's underneath the hood in all of this. So it's for everybody. And I don't care if you're Muslim or Jew or or Hindu or Krishna, Baha'i faith.
As long as you're not a blue pill Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Is such a thing possible?
A blue pill Muslim? Nowadays, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean, though. To be fair, you could say, well, you could read the New Testament, you could say there's no possibility of any, or the Bible, and you could say there's no possibility of being a blue-pilled, like, Christian. But then again, like, I mean, Adam, at the beginning of the world, literally, basically simps to Eve, right? It's like, I ate this fruit, now you eat it. And it's like, oh, okay. And, she ate him out of house and home. You know how many times we heard that story?
I would say there's
whatever.
a very low amount of blue-pilled people in any religion, or of any of the religious practitioners. So if a person goes to religious practice more than once a week, or engages in religious practice more than once a week, then there's a very, very low chance of them being blue-pilled.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's read the scriptures for any amount of time and takes them seriously, there's no way you're going to turn out like all women are queens. Like when Elijah says that one time to Jezebel, it's like, you know, you will die and the dogs will sip up your blood for the sake of your fornications or something like that, right? Like, I mean, that's not the kind of thing that a blue-pilled beta male is going to say.
I immediately amend my statement, because we cannot put all religious people in there, because, for example, if you're part of the Council for World Religion,
Oh, I
which
mean,
is trying to subjugate all religions under one supreme goddess religion, then you are very religious and very blue-pilled indeed.
yeah, but I'm talking about actual religions, not like silly little globalist projects to, like, you know, unify everybody and like gonna, you know, live in pod and eat bugs, right? Like those people don't count.
No, I was also thinking in my
You will
first
own
statement,
nothing
I was
and you will
thinking
love
about
it. You will
Yeah.
own nothing and you will love it. Don't you forget it. You will even rent out the NIV Bible that you read, right? That nearly inerrant version. You can't own that, right? You have to rent that off of Karl Schwab, you know.
Yeah. No, I was also
are a
thinking
Sikh?
about the main religions, so the Abrahamic faiths plus Taoism, Buddhism, and let's say the main branches.
Religions that actually have to manage a society.
Exactly.
I like the Sikhs. I've actually talked to a couple of Sikhs before this book too. So anyways, let me get back to these here. Rattle on about the book a little bit more. Is that it?
I mean,
What did you say?
just on that point, religions that actually have to manage a society, what we just said previously. Secularism is also a religion, and it also manages societies.
Does it?
And there are many.
Does it really? Does it really?
Secularists out there.
We don't even live in a society, bro. We live in an economic system.
Elliot, do you not know that we live in a society?
What do you think I was hinting at, man?
Yeah. No, but that would also be a case of. I mean, you could construct a framework where religions ultimately, like Carl Jung tried to do and stuff like that, where religions ultimately either serve the male or the female aspect, and I think Rollo also hints at that in multiple points, because in the beginning he says that all the religions, like all the Abrahamic or the patriarchal religions, always have a male at the top, and the statements kind of alludes to that there's now, or had a male at the top, that there's now religions and perversions of religions that have a female at the top. And I would say, I would think that Rollo would agree that secularism is and what he calls the gynocentric world order is a religion which puts the female at the top. So even not knowing how valid that is, and of course thinking about things like that, even though we call God the Father, at the end of the day, God is such a self-contained entity that just addressing or applying the masculine principle to the creator is insufficient. And God transcends these kind of things, because of course, if he wouldn't, then they would be something that would be bigger than God, right? But they aren't. So God is something my priest said, and it's going to sound very, very bad in the first place, but please kind of think about the sentence. God is transgender.
Sorry I laughed. I just saw someone say, like, there's a guy in the chat called Censored Nigtau, and the guy goes, Censored Nigtau can type. And that's why I laughed.
Yeah. But just to kind of defend my priest here, what he means by God is transgender is that he transcends every category, and the category of gender is also, of course, it's a very divine category. It's a very big category. Like, you can apply the male and the female attribute to way more than just humans. You can apply it to societies. You can apply it to the ways the heavenly bodies work. There's a lot of ways you can apply the male and the female attributes. But Taoism made a religion out of that. But in the end, God is something that stands even above that. And if you look, maybe we can do that at another time because it's interesting, or I guess I'll do it on my channel at some point, is if you look at, for example, Chinese thinking, Chinese Taoism, then you actually see that there because it also derives from a monotheistic faith that is closer to Christianity than people might think at the first time. Their supreme deity also transcends these kind of two ends of Tao, where it's like the male on the one side and the woman on the one.
You know, you can tell it's the Renaissance man chat when people are still arguing about numbers.
Yeah, I mean, birds of a feather flock together. Autistic computer science man makes a show. Autistic computer science man show up.
Listen, like there's certain kinds of autism, right? And I don't have autism. I like my numbers, okay? They're nice and straightforward. They make me money, okay? I can count my money with numbers, right? Like that's great. But any of this other stuff, nah, I can't be bothered.
Okay, let's go.
When will the book be available on Spark Notes? I don't know. If that's like sort of like, can I get it for free? Hit me up, email me, and if you can't afford the $17 for the book, then hit me up. I'll see what I.
He doesn't get it, does he? He's joking.
Can work out for you. I'm not giving out the PDF to anybody right now, simply because I know what will happen. It will end up on a torrent site the next day. I also happen to know this is that the people who have hated me in the past are going to hate me in the future, and have probably been waiting in the wings for a very long time with a nice spam/review bombing campaign with all their MGTOW doom pill fuckwits to exploit Amazon's a very exploitable review thing. So I'm expecting that. I get it, but I have to also rely on the quality of this book and the information that's in it and the actual material that I get into in this as being why people will want to read this and how it will change your life and how it will make things, it will open your eyes to a lot of things, let's just say. Hopefully it's good enough, because I think a lot of people, like most of my detractors, think like, oh, he just writes books, man. Dude, for anybody who gives me crap about like, oh, he's sold out, man. He's selling it for 16.
I must admit, that doesn't really annoy me when someone says, oh, you're making money on the internet? You must be some sort of sellout. Says the man who doesn't have the patience to write a book.
Yeah. I mean, it's just massive cope. But I would say maybe jump to the next point.
I had something written down, actually, around about this point. There was something that popped into my head. Like, I've got it noted down in my little document, right? There was something he said, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I wanted to respond to it, and it completely flew out my head at the time.
This was like 3 years of my life, first of all. And second of all, it's not like I'm doing this to like sell it on Gumroad for a 97-page pamphlet as a product or something. This is a book. I'm an author. Okay, I'm not doing like product launch formula, right? I'm not a niche marketer. I don't have a drop shipping.
That was it.
New Valet makes
does he make
makes
a
a great comment in the comment section. He just says, maybe your book sucks. Which, I mean, to be fair, this is...
I haven't written a book yet, so I need to write a book, right?
Yeah, no, I think he says it to Rollo on the whole review bombing thing, and this is something that gets very, very precarious if you go into the higher ranks of celebrity and people start getting disconnected from reality because it's just something that you can't grasp anymore. It's impossible for, let's say, a major movie star to grasp their real popularity. They are dependent on things like reviews and that stuff. And of course, they can also tell themselves these stories where it's like, you made a really, really bad movie, but you tell yourself, oh, it was just these haters. The negative people who can't have anything good in life. And because those people obviously exist, there will always be people out there who typologize demons, basically. You can always kind of blame them for any kind of upset. So if Rollo is having problems with really bad book reviews, then maybe it's not the haters,
Yeah,
maybe
you can tell
they
the
don't
difference. You can tell the difference between a troll... like actual written reviews, you can tell the difference between a serious review and a troll review pretty quickly. Like, just by the tone. But, yeah.
Site. That's not me. I write books, and I help guys. That's what I've done for, I guess, since 2002, really. 18, 19 years. You don't believe me? I'll be happy to give you the links to all the SoSuave stuff that I wrote way back in 2002. Is it on SparkNotes? No, it's not on SparkNotes. It's not going to be on SparkNotes.
I think there probably might be a SparkNotes of it at some point.
Yeah.
Oh wait.
Because I don't think they could get. I don't think he'd get him for copyright infringement. I mean, it's like. I mean, it's SparkNotes.
Terminator, I got you. Hi, Rollo. First, congratulations on your 4th book. I'm halfway through the preventive medicine. Good. Great read. I recently started. I'm glad you did because I was really talking about that last few weeks. I recently started in sales, auto business, and I'm curious how sales can improve my game.
Oh no.
Do you want to reply to that part, or should we just skip it?
I mean, I don't know why you get a job too. I mean, it may be the case that he's got. I mean, top Terminator T800. Yeah, let's skip ahead. Actually, I had something on in a minute or two. So like 2 minutes ahead. We'll skip ahead like a minute, right? Because there was something I wanted to respond to it there.
Similarities between game today for sure, and brand management. And that's really what you're doing. Is if you have an Instagram account, if you have a Facebook, if you have any kind of social media presence, you're managing the brand of you. I call it the brand of me. And
actually, one thing that I'm working on that I might start selling through Gumroad, I've been working on a protocol for planning social media presence, and based on ISO 27001 security systems documentation, right? I've been studying that for my graduate degree, so I decided, well, hey, I've had an idea. I'm going to write something similar for social media accounts so you can risk manage them and plan everything out. So like a nice checklist, a bunch of protocol information, right? I spent about, I'd say 2.5 hours writing it today. I don't know when it will be done, but yeah, if that works out, I'll sell it through Gumroad at some point.
And another thing, also I mentioned in book 4, by the way, is the hustle economy. The hustle economy can be anything from niche marketing to what I was talking about, selling a pamphlet on Gumroad.
You know, this channel was originally a hustle because I lost my job, and I wanted to make money so I could keep the lights on. And for a while I was continually churning out videos, I was actually paying off my rent and I was paying my my utilities just through this channel, right? Never underestimate the hustle thing.
But niche marketing also applies, to dating. The hustle economy is dating. You're doing brand management of yourself. What are you selling? Yourself. You're hoping to get laid. You're hoping to, maybe start a family. I don't want to play games anymore. I have 3 kids from 2 different husbands, and I'm 40 years old, but I'm done with the games. I've had my fun, and there's no fun left for you. That's brand management. Bad brand management, but it's brand management. Anise and Krill, you didn't give me
one stop there.
All right.
Because I mentioned it last time that about the situation that my mother's in, and he kind of makes a caricature of a similar situation.
Yeah, but it's clearly different. He's referring to like the kind of girl that was like mucking around, right?
But yeah, I know, but the idea to break it down into brand management like that, because the thing I'm seeing, sure, if it is honest, like obviously dishonest, I would say it's a form of bad brand management. But if it is just honesty, then sure, you can always say, oh, this is sales. Like honesty can also be a marketing strategy. Yeah, of course. But it's so much more, and I just hate this. When this was the part when I watched the video in preparation for these streams, I got a bit angry on that part because it's so misunderstanding, so autistic. I'm in a what's it called, international business course or bachelor's degree in university, and we have a marketing professor there who sees all of the world through marketing, and the man is basically a psychopath. I mean, he's a great professor, don't get me wrong, but as a person he is completely useless. Like, he's not a good person. You can see that from a mile away because he has such a psychopathic way of thinking about life, where everything is just marketing and kind of getting your sale across. And this is exactly what I'm seeing here with this kind of idea of where a woman breaks down, because this is of course what he imitates. It's like, I don't want to play games anymore. it can be genuine, and of course, as we've outlined in the last stream as well, sure, you don't have to take her back for that, but that is a point where she does need help, and this help doesn't have to mean that now some guy has to stoop up and be the provider there, but things like other things can be there for her, that where it's not some guy sacrificing himself. It's a community can be there for her. Her church can be there for that. Like maybe church members volunteer to take the kids for a day in the week, that kind of stuff. So because in the end, humans are team players, and we go through life as teams and groups, and kind of saying this, oh, you're just kind of trying to maximize your own advantage here, and this is just a sales strategy you're doing, and you would be living better if you had a better sales strategy. I just find so repulsive in the end.
I mean, I'm sure that you could apply this to many instances in Rollo's life that aren't public, and even public things. Like, I can recall examples where he's made himself look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, where was the brand management then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you give me a sticker? Maybe you gave me a sticker.
Oh, that was what I was going to mention. Yeah, so when I was watching this part of the video, I was thinking, well, why does the particular kind of woman that he's asserting here do this, right? Like, obviously the kind of girl that's been, like, around the place is clearly insincere. But it's like, well, this is precisely what I've written, right? I'll just read it off of the screen. Like, why does a woman say that she's done with it, right? Because she's unable to fill her sexual appetite because she's sleeping around so much. Naturally, as she gets into marriage, the less sex is happening, and so her desire goes down. But eventually she'll get snared back into it because she'll do something lustful, and that'll excite the passion. And because she doesn't have the appetite filled, and it's, back to the position where she can get addicted again, she goes completely doolally. Right? Like, it's a lack of impulse control there, in that case. Right? Which is why I'm personally, like, I wouldn't marry a single mother for that reason, because I could never be certain.
Yeah.
Like, I don't hate them. I mean, people in my family are, right? But I wouldn't personally take the risk myself.
No, I think like bringing that together with the things I just spoke about. Again, there's no obligation there where you have to say, when a woman, let's take really the meme example. She has 3 kids from 3 different guys, and those 3 different guys were actually just the accidents out of 30 guys. And then she's 33, she's not attractive anymore. She goes on Tinder and she says, I don't want to play games anymore, I just want to find a real man who can love me and
that's why she went on
settle
Tinder.
down with me. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of jazz. Just say, we could just stress it again. You don't have to supply her drug to her, or rectify her life for her, or just act as if nothing happened there. All of those things are clearly wrong, but it's also a completely obvious thing that is a person that is in need of help, and you are not obligated to help like some person you see on a profile on a dating app somewhere. But if these people are in your circles, maybe they're old school friends of yours who, always they were kind of like sexually licentious, but now it's coming home to roost, these kind of things, then you do have an obligation to help them. And again, like this is exactly the kind of thing. Like it is very often that you don't help people by giving them what they immediately think they need for themselves. A woman who is a single mother and had 30 partners and now has 3 children, she most likely will never be able to be in a healthy long-term relationship. But she still has to live a life, and she still has to be there with her children. And those are the things you can help her with. Even though you might say to her, okay, let's be serious here. Like, I wouldn't want to be the man who settles for you. I mean, you probably would never say to it because it's just hurtful and doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
But
man.
you can think that for the rest of your life, basically.
Oh man, there's this. It reminds me of this girl I used to know. I used to really like her, and she was like, I suppose, kind of emotionally cheating on her boyfriend with me, right? And I remember I sat there for 4 hours and told her, like, I don't want you touching me anymore, right? Because it was clear that it was going, like, well over the top, right? And it was, like, 4 hours, and, like, she originally thought I was joking. Because I wanted to be friends with her still, right? And, like, as I'm leaving, she sort of giggles to herself and, like, shakes my hand, right? And, like, oh, I'm going to be able to get him at this point. And I just stared her blank in the face. I'm like, no, I'm not touching you, love. And she slammed the door in my face.
You know the stone toss meme?
Which one?
Where there's this one guy and he goes to the other guy and he goes, "Hey, do you want my old couch?" And the other guy says,
"Oh no, no, stop!"
No, I'm not going to be as explicit.
I know what it is. Like, don't please, no.
Then he basically is more explicit about like things that happen on that couch, and then that repeats for three other items. That every time the guy offering gets explicit, the other guy immediately goes no. And then in the third case, he goes, "Hey, do you want my ex-girlfriend?" And the other guy starts like wondering. And of course, it's like Stone Toss making exactly that case. It's kind of the same logic of you wouldn't download a car. In this case, you wouldn't take a second-hand couch, you know.
Yeah, you wouldn't steal a car.
Thank you for the $5. Your $5 contribution is very appreciated. See, there's $5 right there. You can't afford 17.
Let's see the question. As far as SMV goes, is genuine desire a side effect, necessity, or okay? So English clearly isn't his first language, and or being 3 points higher in SMV can be conflated with need. Oh, okay. He talks about like SMV being subjective here. Okay, this is irrelevant. He explains the layout of the book in about 10 minutes, so let's skip to that.
Okay.
Right, that sounds like something interesting.
Yeah.
Change, and I want to do it in a hardback because I've had so many people ask me about that. So I'm gonna at least in the
Don't worry, guys. He's talking about rewriting the first volume of his Rational Mail thing.
I'm gonna take some time off, right? I need to collect my thoughts here for about 4 or 5 months. Audible, of course, and Sam Bada will say as well. We're really working on the audio right now. Hopefully, have it by March. I really want to have it by March. So those are my main priorities right now. So I would definitely like to talk to you about translations. Wando says, what's the role of religion on this new world? Well, you'll have to read the book, Wando. You'll have to pick it up. I can briefly tell you. I talk about how we're sort of headed right now, and the last chapter of the book explains this, I think, pretty accurately. By the way, before I get to your question, I need to explain how the book is, the architecture of the book. So there's two halves of the book. There's book 1 and book 2. I've done this before in my other stuff as well. There's book 1 and book 2. In book 1, I try to explain some red pill principles for people who don't understand the red pill. It's like red pill for the people who don't get the red pill. And for guys who are already part of the manosphere, or you're just coming into this is really good either way, because it explains and it untangles a few things. Now, it's not a rehash of the first book whatsoever, because all of the things that I talk about in book 1 relate to all the concepts in book 2, which is they're in the same book. There's book 1 and book 2. And
to be fair, I find book 2 kind of boring because if memory serves me, he basically just goes through like different stages in a woman's life and using her age to determine what will be most effective on her. If memory serves me.
Okay.
Like, I remember I quit halfway through because I found it really boring. Huh? Sorry?
I've only read book 1, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I kind of tie it up with a nice bow. And that bow is exactly what you were just asking me. What does religion look like in the New Order? Well, it looks to me, anyways, like a global syncretic religion. It looks like an amalgam of, Oprah-esque, Oprah-ish.
Oh, I mean, he's talking about religion in this order, right? I don't think he knows this, but people have been discussing this sort of emotionalism that he's going to talk about for over, at least 85 years. Because Hilaire Belloc talks about this in his book, The Great Heresies. And this was published in 1935, 1936, right? He describes it as the Antichrist, or as anti-logos. Like, he says explicitly in the book, like, I'm going to call it Antichrist, but really I don't want this spread around because it sounds kind of over the top. Because it does sound over the top, like if you don't know what he's actually referring to. But then he proceeds to go on, and he essentially describes what Rollo's describing, right? Like this sort of syncretic mess of emotionalistic religion, right? That means nothing and is a waste of time, right? I have a suspicion. Actually, I don't know for certain. I have a feeling that René Guénon or Julius Evola might have talked about this at some point. Um, that was it. Father Seraphim Rose talks about it in Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. Like this kind of he has kind of a weird. He really does not like the charismatic renewal. I'll put it that way. He also talks about other quasi-religious phenomena like UFOs and the Hare Krishnas and things like that, right? Like quite a bit of detail. It's quite good. It's quite good about, except when he has these really strange takes on Protestantism and Catholicism. Like those bits aren't that great, but I found his approach to UFOs particularly to be very interesting. So this isn't Rollo discovering this. This is something that's been talked about for nearly 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it is kind of taking up steam in the modern era. So what we spoke about previously, the Council on World Religions, is one of those movements where they kind of try to bring all the religions together. Burning Man is another one. Actually, there's this one guy who covers them both. If you just look up the Council for World Religions on YouTube, I think you find he's a Baptist. He's like a bit more of a chubby guy, a bit older. And you will also find him talking about Burning Man, because he goes to Burning Man every time it takes place, and it kind of has a little camp for the unknown god, which is of course the Christian god, and kind of tries to relay the religion to the people there. But he also describes what he sees on Burning Man. And the
is he based?
He is okay. Like he's a decent Protestant. Like for the Protestants, he's really good. Let's put it like that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So at least he's like I like how he's taken the kind of St. Paul kind of tune to it, right? Like actually, if you could give me that channel, that would be something very interesting to go and have a look. Yeah. Also, we're about to get Settler's Lament. He fell asleep, so he's about to join.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you the channel after the stream, sure.
Yeah. I mean, like anything to do with these sorts of new agey stuff, it's really I find it very fascinating because it's basically the world that we live in, right? Like.
Yes.
It's. I mean, I've seen it in 4-Hour Workweek. Like transcendental meditation is talked about. It's. I mean, it's in like corporate, like human development stuff. Like people aren't even aware of it. Like it's not like explicit like it was in the 1970s, where you had like the Flower Power. What's his name? Carlos Venetura, whatever his name was. You had all of these like Taoist not Taoist monasteries, like Buddhist monasteries being built across America. You had, like the Beatles involved in transcendental meditation. Like that. It was all explicit back then. Now it's just seeped into the culture and it's just latent everywhere, and you can't avoid it. It's like I think it was Father John Hardon who likened it to like a Hinduization of Western civilization.
Yeah.
Right.
The Hinduization of Western civilization also is something very, very old. I have a book on my shelf from Hegel. Not one of his main books, but one of his. It's his book on history, and this is the first thing he laments: is how at the moment all these people are Hinduizing their takes on or are being so influenced by Hindu thought. And I mean, Hegel he's writing in the 18th century,
early 19th.
Yeah. So I think late 18th, early 19th.
I can't remember. He was very young when Napoleon took Prussia out. Like I remember that being mentioned. Yeah, I know that Schopenhauer was certainly influenced by these sorts of things, like quite explicitly. Yeah. I mean, he was influenced by the pre-Socratics quite a lot as well. Like he talks at length about Heraclitus.
Yeah.
Right. Like there was all kinds of this weird pre-Socratic Hinduistic thought going on in the 19th century. And it's just flowed through and kind of become normal thinking nowadays, which is horrible. Horrible. Schopenhauer named his dog Atman. The dog was him? Yeah, because the Atman is the concept of the self, and through centering prayer, you get into touch with the Atman, which is connected to the Dharma, from what I remember, and that's God. So, like, God is just within you, and this is basically just Gnosticism. Right.
I mean, the great thing about things like Hinduism is that you basically can start your own religion just going off of it. And every person who gets into, let's say, religious thinking, but then kind of off on their own way down the road, they usually discover Hinduism and they find it amazing because it's just a like loose amalgamation of different philosophies that aren't that bad. And you can just more or less pick and mix whatever you want into whatever form you want. And that is also, of course, why you find Hindus affirming completely opposite, like or Western Hindus affirming completely opposite ends of the spectrum of ideas. I mean, um, the mid-century Germans were basing their new ideas as much on Hinduism as the New Age movement was.
Yeah, also, Isidore says that it's not necessarily correct. Yeah, I'm aware there's like 6 different schools of Hinduism, so not all of it is going to be pantheistic. Right? I know for a fact that there are monotheistic, Hindu schools, right? But the big ones right now are the pantheistic ones, particularly in the West. So I respond to that. And that's essentially what Father John Harden talks about. He was a famous Jesuit philosopher and a theologian who studied the Eastern religions pretty heavily.
Yeah. So fear the one world religion, guys. It is coming. It is approaching.
We're gonna reach the Omega point, and
Feel good emotionalism. The religion of the new order right now is emotionalism, and we're already there. We worship emotion. We do today. We will.
Yeah, he's completely right.
Will deify how we feel, and we will deify love. That's why I wrote there's a section in the book called "Love is God." I mean, we've taken the emotion, the emotive state.
I mean, I'd call it Coom is God, because I don't think you can call like lovey-dovey feelings love. Like, it's associated with being in a relationship with a person, but it is not the same as what love actually is, which is willing the good of the other.
Yeah, exactly. I think we got on that in the last video as well. It's kind of mistaking the concept of love with the feeling of love. And the point I made, and I made in the video of mine as well, is that, well, the moment you fall in love is immediately preceding, or the moment you feel love when you fall in love is immediately preceding your. Is it preceding or anteceding? It's immediately coming after you're falling in love. So you fall in love first, and then your brain starts giving you the corresponding emotions and all that kind of jazz. Because what your body really is, what your brain really is just a machine supplying your spirit, basically. So your spirit has chosen an object of love, and now the machine just appropriates that to the workings of the machine, and it starts giving you hormones and making you feel crazy and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, love is much more than the feeling of love, and Christianity definitely seems to have that down.
Yeah, I just want to correct Isidore here, who says that Hinduism doesn't believe in God. There are actually classically theistic Hindu schools, so that's not really true. And there are also pantheistic ones. Advaita, I think it's called, right? Like the really big one, that's pantheistic. So it does believe in God. It just believes that the God is in the self. Right.
Matthew Berry actually makes a point. Well, Hinduism is an Indo-European religion. In most places had pagan religions very similar to Hindu prior to Christianity. So it's just a return to the prior state, like a house falling into decay. Not quite. I mean, it's technically correct, but the prior state is not Indo-European religions, even though a lot of people think that nowadays, and even though like very old scholarship, like 18th, 19th century scholarship, has them as pantheistic, actually seem to start in monotheism. So they start having a singular, like the things that we can nowadays say about Indo-European religions is that they have a singular male god who is seen as a father of the sky. They usually have a conception of the flood. They usually have conceptions of sacrifices. They usually have conceptions of kind of circularity within them. And they start building a pantheon around that god, but it seems like you have a procession downwards, where you start at one god and then you go into many. You can kind of think about that if you take the church, heresies in the church sometimes that the church was very efficient at working against, sometimes in different regions, people would start praying to their saints as if they were deities. And those were the points the church stepped in and said, no, you have to pray like for intercession, that kind of stuff. But imagine that going on without the church being there to correct that. In that case, suddenly you have this pantheon filling up. where once there was this unitive God, this one God idea, now more and more things that are divine crop up as equal to that God, and suddenly you get into the pantheistic ideas of what you see with the Greeks and with the later Hindus. But if you want to say, oh, the purest, the earliest religion, then you go back into monotheism. And of course, this very much coincides with the Christian idea, where all the religions develop out of monotheism. The fall at Babel is usually the point in Second Temple literature, where the monotheistic religions that venerate the one supreme being start scattering into the polytheistic religions, which have pantheons and gods that are at odds with the supreme God and equal to the supreme God, and all those kind of things, and only the Jews are the ones who are maintaining the status quo or the oldest thing. So in that case, the falling back onto the foundations would be going back to monotheism and not be going back to polytheistic Hinduism, which is a much later development out of that again.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue with Rollo, because we've kept him paused for quite a while.
Yeah.
State of love, like the feeling of love, and raised it to such a high...
Sorry, the screen goes black. Whenever the screen goes black, I'm looking at another tab. I was just checking to see when Settler's going to be on. It seems like he's going to be a bit...
degree that it has become the god of emotionalism.
Wow, speak of the devil. Hey.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I needed to take my dog out after I woke up.
No problem. Right, let's continue then.
And since women are the primaries in this gynocentric world order right now, we place emotionality, emotionalism above everything else. And I mean everything else.
Well, I mean, I think that women can control their emotions. It's just that they're not taught how to. It's like with beta men, right? Like the beta man is the default, and the kinds of women that the red pill guys are trying to avoid, that's kind of the default now as well, right? That they're just emotional wrecks, right? Like, oh man, the amount of times where you see like a woman go nuts on a night out because she's had too much to drink, and like, oh, I've got all these problems at home, all my parents are divorced. It's like, yeah, but like, get a grip, love, right? Like you're like, that's half of people.
I mean, something on his meta narrative that kind of I guess breaks apart in a bit is that he up until to this point he always kind of equated it with equated the thing you have to fight against in gynocentrism, all those kind of things, with old order thinking, and now he and advocates for new order thinking, but now he shows how these are actually new things, like new order things that are coming about. And this is really where he is, I would say, or where he is a bit arbitrary in the sense of he does not understand that old order thinking makes sense in an old order world, that the new order world is really something superimposed to it. And things he advocates for, so the red pill lifestyle basically, are reactions to this new order world, and they stand and die with the existence of this new order world. So as long as, let's say, the gynocentric one world order female-headed religion is getting into power, or even in power, his red pill ideas have merit. But as soon as as it dissolves, his red pill ideas lose merit. So his kind of idea of, oh, this is like the old order thinking has to be abandoned, and now we have to engage in the new order thinking, kind of breaks down at that point. No, it's the new order that is coming about is strictly evil in a sense. You just have to defend, like you have to fight for the old order.
Yeah. Could you ST answer George Washington's question in the chat, because he wants to know how we know that the first humans were monotheist.
Okay, George Washington. It's not with things like that. It's not like, completely clear. The consensus, the scientific consensus, for a while used to be, let's say, 19th century, 20th century, used to be that they were polytheists. because the oldest religions we could identify were basically the old European pagan religions. But since then, we have found more and more evidence of, for example, older practices. I have a book on my shelf here. It's called Die geschmiedeten Himmel, or Der geschmiedete Himmel. It's a German book on German Bronze Age artifacts and on the collections of German Bronze Age artifacts. And there you have a religion that is completely centered around the sun as the central deity, which is the same as Judaism at that time in their symbolism. So if you go into the early Bronze Age, then you will find Jewish artifacts that depict the sun that is surrounded by feathered snakes, and those were contemporary depictions of God being surrounded by the seraphim, which only later got usually depicted in the way in which they are described in one of the visions of the Bible. But the original depiction of the seraphim is a feathered snake, or a snake with wings. So, for example, this oldest religion we find in Europe seems to be monotheistic. And then also, as we reconstructed Indo-European thought and Indo-European languages, the central deity they all have in common is Deus Pater. And then we believe them to be polytheistic because we could also reconstruct other names, like, for example, the Supreme Mother. And so we thought, okay, maybe there's a supreme couple that all the European religions have in common. But then you go into China, and there's, let's say, mounting evidence that European, or these Indo-European ideas also influence Chinese religion and religiosity. And there you only have Shangdi, or Tian, which is the supreme sky deity, and a completely monotheistic idea, which is very close, as I said, like Taoism develops out of a belief in Tian. And in Taoism, the male and the female principle are superseded by Shangdi or Tian. So now that our knowledge of these very, very ancient religions mounts up, we find more and more, let's say, corroborative evidence that these have a concept of a higher deity that surpasses all the others. There's also very old tellings of, for example, Germanic pagans that make it sound as if, even though these have been translated by Christian monks, so maybe they are edited, but that make it sound as if when these old Germanic pagans are doing their temples, they also have a appreciation that there's a deity there that stands above all their pagan gods that they cannot comprehend, kind of like a supreme deity. And also there the ideas that all of reality rests upon that deity. And then the last point that is also mounting up more and more is uncontacted tribes that have been left alone for many, many, many thousands of years until they have been contacted. We find more and more of them that are actually monotheistic. And the really spooky thing is that some of those seem to remember different points of the Genesis story, because you find these uncontacted tribes, they haven't been contacted by any kind of Western civilization, and in some cases you can even prove that, and suddenly they say, oh yeah, there's one god, and in the beginning there was a tree and a man and a woman, and the woman ate from the tree, and then they separated from the one deity. And you say, oh, have you really been not contacted? There's a YouTube channel. He goes into some of that if you're interested. He's called Inspiring Philosophy. He has a video that is called A Case for Ancient Monotheism. It's not exhaustive. He makes a lot of interesting points. It's not an exhaustive video, but all the other sources I would have would be A, in German, and B, in scattered around numerous books. But yeah, as we're progressing through very ancient anthropology, that kind of jazz, let's say the assumption that these people used to be, or used to start out polytheistic, is getting more and more into an opinion rather than, let's say, anything that we can derive out of the data.
Right, okay. Let's continue with Rollo. I'm sure that the Sattler is probably going to want to say something.
Yeah.
I guess one thing to add to that is I know, of course, like, the big-brained atheists would say that that like the reason we used to think these that have this erroneous anthropology about the development of religion is just because we just looked at the evidence and found that haha, God's not real, and all the ancient people that worship stuff, that they weren't even monotheists, they were polytheists. But I mean, really, this all goes back to Whig history and the idea that there had been a historical development in religion, which was very central to that. That originally they were polytheists, and that was like the weird, undeveloped thing people did. And then eventually, as society developed, it became monotheistic, and then it became Christian, and that was the height of civilization. And Protestantism was the height of that. And then you can just kind of get rid of religion, then, or you can become a deist or something, because because all that other religion stuff is just cringe in the older line of evolution. So really, the idea of ancient polytheism is tied up very closely with Enlightenment narratives and the sort of development of history that they believe what was occurring.
There's a reason why we don't use Edward Gibbon as a source nowadays, and it's because he completely falsifies a lot of the evidence from the Church Fathers because he doesn't like them. I think I mentioned this on another stream.
Well, yeah, I mean, Gibbon, I think it was him that just blatantly lied about the Council of Nicaea and said that's where the Bible was created. I don't know how anyone could say that.
Voltaire did. Voltaire, okay. And he had an excuse to know better. The Enlightenment was not the Enlightenment. It was a bunch of very angry lawyers who decided to write some false things because they didn't like the state of society.
Yeah.
It's like when Lenin says, "Oh, we're just going to let the society wither away," unquote, quoting from what's his name, Engels. And then the reality of that, he says it's violent in the State and Revolution, but the reality of that is locking kulaks and locking rebellious peasants in burning cages with the checker, right? Yeah, it's just completely out of accordance with nature, and so likewise out of accordance with truth.
Yeah. I just would like.
Yeah, my basic point with that was I know it's rambling a bit, but basically what I was trying to say is none of this came from some sort of value neutral analysis. That this was a part of a very specific secular religion that was being developed.
Yeah. I would like to, even though I know we're paused for a very long time, but I would like to hit on something that George Washington said in the comment section. I think somewhat in reply to my tirade on early religion and what we know about early religion. And that is, there's no way only two humans created all of mankind.
I'll tell you what. If you guys are going to go do that, I'm going to go for a leak. I'll be real quick.
Okay, sure. So on that point, there's actually a lot of positions nowadays that kind of deal with that question. And the one that is the most favored, and I think even Jimmy Akin talks about that, and he's kind of like a very towing the line, middle of the road kind of Catholic, is because we know now that humanity is a kind of a fusion of different species of human. You have a bit of Neanderthal in you. You have different, I think two or three species are part of every race of humanity, and then each of the major races. So I think Caucasian, Asian, African, Polynesian, and one more all have one very specific other hominid they also interbreed with that makes them kind of go so much apart from another. Because of course, if you look at the bone structure, if you look at the facial structure, there's a major difference there. And so the idea that is the most commonly held in regards to these discussions now is that basically the pure humans, Adam and Eve, are kind of, let's say, created into the world, given into the world. There's some species they are even sometimes identified with, though I would say we're not that far yet. They are created into the world, and they pretty early start intermixing with all the other species. And the reasons for that, why that is multifold, or let's say the justifications before scripture. One of the ideas is that these are born as like a pair of high priests. I think this is what Inspiring Philosophy believes and peddles in his videos, is that Adam and Eve are born as a pair of high priests, and kind of they are meant to lead or be the priests to humanity through their lineage, which interbreeds with the other hominids. And then there's people who say these are actually the only real humans, let's say the purest humans. And nowadays, all of us are actually kind of like offsprings of them and these other hominids, which are, of course, usually nowadays identified with the Nephilim, with the or the daughters of men, depending on your position on this kind of teaching in the Old Testament. Because, of course, there is like a spelling in the Genesis story on interbreeding with other hominid kind of creatures, where it says the sons of God had children with the daughters of men. And there's the idea that either the outcome of that are the other hominid species, that Adam and Eve's small little tribe would be around, or that the outcome of that is the the sons of God, in this case, this is like the church fathers actually split on that here. So some believe the one thing, some believe the other thing, even though, of course, they don't have the ideas of hominid species, whatever. But basically, it's either all the other hominid species are kind of sons of let's say other deities that are not directly created by God, or that the sons of God are actually the line of Adam and Eve, and the daughter of men are the other hominids, the other, let's say, apes that are running around that these are interbreeding with. So I hope that answers your kind of contentions on the whole incest thing.
Okay, right. So let's continue with this, because I'm sure you guys have been. Oh wait, did you have something to say, Settler?
I was going to ask. Do either of you know what the church fathers said on that question? If there were other people around?
What, before Adam and Eve?
Well, at that time, yeah.
Generally, it said that. I mean, I think it's actually church doctrine that there weren't like humans, in the sense of them having a rational soul at the very least. There was Adam and Eve, and we were all descended from them. But some people I've heard take it in different ways, right? Like, I'm not entirely sure myself. But yeah. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
So we build it into a religion. So everything is like tolerance and love and multiculturalism and inclusiveness and interfaith worship services and the Beyonce worship service and we need women pastors, and we've got these women with frocks with the rainbow whatever it is, kente cloth, right? It's rainbow cloth. And it's all about love, and love is that's what they'll say. Love wins, right? This is the house of love. This is the house that love built, and we've taken the word love and the emotive state of love, which is a physical, emotional state. It's a feeling. It has to be the highest thing we feel because it's what binds us together as tribes, binds us together as family, binds us to our kids.
And he begins with the evolutionary stuff.
Yes.
Let's let him finish.
Binds us to our spouse or spouses or whatever we love, kind of thing. We've taken the feeling, the state of love, the emotive state of love, and lifted it up to an emotional state that is God. And so it's not God is love anymore. It is love is God now. And I make that distinction in the book. You can read it a little bit. You can get a lot more detail about it. But a new world order, a new world religion will be founded on that term, on that idea. So what I do, and again, getting back to the architecture of the book, I build it up to those last chapters right there so you understand what I'm talking about. Because the way that we come to the concept of love is God comes through from our biological states, from what we are as just the human machine, right? What we've evolved to be.
The human machine. No. Because the mechanistic principle doesn't apply to all of man.
Mm-hmm.
The intellect and the will being the two primary operations that are mechanistic.
Yeah.
Has made us, prioritize right now in this, we do this differently, right? But I mean, men prioritize reason in our natural states, prioritize reason before emotion. We're just, our brain architecture, our biology is like that. But we tell men that they're
I'm sorry, but the brain doesn't reason, otherwise dogs and monkeys could reason in the same way that we can. But they can't, because it isn't actually in the brain architecture itself. It's the intellectual.
To be fair, I guess the point against that would be to say, no, it's our brains are that more advanced if you, let's say, upgraded the dog's brain. Yeah, I mean this is the thing, right?
There's actually a materialistic neuroscientist called I can only remember his surname, Gazaniga, who says that the human brain has identical brain structures to all of the other mammals, yet we still have this higher thought. Now, I know for a fact that you can't take account for this in a material sense, simply because it would be impossible to do the kind of abstract thinking that we do without things, like, in some sense, being immaterial, right? Like truth, like being able to discern truth. It's not something that dwells in any particular thing as an accident, but it's something that's still nonetheless there. Like, we can entertain being, we can entertain beauty in the abstract, we can entertain, economics. You don't see monkeys doing economics. Like, you don't see them composing
You would be surprised if you go into international business management. You would be surprised how many monkeys are doing economics.
I mean, there's like bean counters, but like they're not anatomically.
You would be surprised. No, I'm joking.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Defective, or they're incorrect for not getting in touch with their emotions. We prioritize emotion for everything, really, for our academics, for our politics, for our religion, for our music, for our popular culture. Everything is follow your heart. We have never been in a more feminized society, a social.
I mean, it's funny that he says follow the heart, because the heart is often used metaphorically in the scriptures and is described as the will, right? Like, it's a metaphor for the will. And this whole modern era begins with Nietzsche, who says, will to power, right? Just do what you want, and do what your heart tells you, right? Like, it's the mixing of the metaphors there. All this begins with, well, I mean, obviously it doesn't all begin with Nietzsche, but, like, you can see Nietzsche's influence there, as well as this, like, silly little term, moral value, right? Moral value. How do I weigh up the moral choices? No, there's moral truths. There's moral truths. There's not any of this value stuff, like, oh, you can just have your own different opinions, bro, don't impose them. No, it's a lie. Nietzsche never made any pretenses to truth. He actually makes it very clear. He was just a rhetorician. He was a philologist, right? And that is what is influencing modern thought. Value as opposed to truth. The eye of the beholder.
Order in today, and it's globalized right now. And that globalized order, that emotional order, that based on emotionalism, needs a religion that everyone can get behind. And guys will say, well, that'll never happen because my Orthodox, Christian faith of Eastern Europe from 1846 to 1941.
I mean, it will never happen, because you saw what the Christians did to Rome, right? And they tried a similar thing by integrating all of the different cults at once, and look what happened there. Collapsed into the ground. Yeah. Like the Egyptians, for all of their unpleasantries, they had an incredibly conservative pagan cult, right? And that's why it survived for so long. Romans, they just mixed everything in. And what did they get? They got the crisis of the 3rd century, a bunch of crazy cults that burnt the place down. You had Sol Invictus, and then Jesus triumphs over all of them.
I mean, I would contend, though, that the Romans mixing everything in together kind of led them onto the path of Sol Invictus, which I would say made the coming about of Christ much easier. And at least in some degree, as far as I'm knowledgeable, the church used some Sol Invictus, not teaching, but symbolism. So, like, if there's like old, let's say, depictions of suns, they would superimpose the Christian message and Christian iconography onto that. So I would say that the amalgamation, because this is actually something I quite like in history, is kind of the Romans bring back together all the pagan gods in their, let's say, in their worldly ways, kind of like the Hebrews who are building the temple under Solomon, and then the one they leave out in Athens, the unknown god, the stone that is thrown away in the temple of Solomon, is the one that crowns them all. So the unknown god in that one case, and then the unknown stone, like the stone that was thought to be inadequate in the other case, and of course the keystone is equated with Christ by himself, comes to crown this kind of, let's say, even in some sense futile effort of building a stairway up to heaven. That he kind of sits down upon that and says, here, this, like, you can't come up to me, I have to come down to you. Yeah,
is the best, and that's the only real way of thinking about religion. Well, my message to guy, and it doesn't have to be Christianity, it could be anything, right? Like, my message to you is that in 1 to 2 generations, you won't even know, because all this stuff spreads exponentially over the net, over our communication. So you might say that about...
Yeah, and you know what will happen? Those people will fornicate, abort, and masturbate themselves to death, and so there will be no competition. It's a self-solving problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is one of the white-pilling things about progressive Christianity, is that it's mostly dying off and destroying itself.
They're sterile.
Yeah. Even among Protestants, the successful Protestant groups are the more conservative ones. I mean, with that said, I mean, some of what he's saying here is true. To the extent that groups that are not the one true church and that do not have that divine promise to never be led into error, they do just accept quite blatant error sometimes, and they get replicated even by the more conservative elements. I mean, where we see this best is, of course, contraception, which is accepted by basically everyone except the Catholic Church. And you can find the occasional like ultra conservative Baptist that is against contraception, but for the most part in like the evangelical community, it's just like people would not even understand that there's any possibility for a moral objection to contraception. It wouldn't even be something on their radar. So I mean, I would not be surprised, to be honest, if like even now, female pastors are not that uncommon among moderately conservative evangelicals. So there are certain things that could just become could become much more popular among those groups.
Yeah, like it's going to be a rough life for us, but our children and our grandchildren, if we keep in this way, like it's not going to be nearly as hard, because the people will just masturbate themselves out of existence. Simple as.
Yeah, the problem is kind of with homosexuality as well, right? Homosexuals don't reproduce amongst each other; they reproduce by affecting children.
Don't drop epic gamer moments on my streams, okay?
Was this too risque, or was it?
Yeah, this is the LGBTQ sort of stuff is a little bit too risque when you get in that direction.
Okay, but was this okay? Like, was this within the bounds, or
like I suppose just making a fuss over it enough is enough to get people to read about it. But like, yeah, don't do these epic gamer moment kind of things like that level. Like, even I have a limit.
Okay, sure. I'll dial it down.
Yeah.
About you might even be able to say that about your kids, but your grandchildren, this doesn't work. And again, in the beginning of the book, in the architecture of the book, I talk about the kosher dynamic, or the kosher principle.
Oh, here we go. This is the bit that we actually addressed last stream.
Kosher principle applies to that. That's why I say that
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, Rollo, but as far as I understand your kosher principle, it just doesn't correspond to reality, because most of the laws in the Old Testament do not have an evolutionary function, right? As we demonstrated in the last stream, they don't, because they just don't make any sense, right? Like the strange, obscure. I don't actually have my Bible within arm's reach. I could read the NRSV. I'll read the NRSV. Why not? It's got imprimatur. I don't like it because it doesn't have a nihil obstat on it, and it's called the not racist and sexist version. NRSV.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thanks be to God. We open it up on the correct chapter, Leviticus chapter 11. From among all the land animals, these are the creatures that you may eat. Any animal that has divided hooves, or is cloven-footed and chews the cud, such you may eat. But among those that chew the cud and have divided hooves, you shall not eat the following, like camels. Right, that's the first thing it mentions, right? You have this society that lives in an area which has a lot of desert, and there's a good chance that Jews are going to end up trapped in the desert. And yet, again, the direct commandment of the Mosaic Covenant is for them to not eat their animals even if they're going to die. You see this manifest, and it's the same with swine meat, right? Like, they martyr 7 children of a mother in 2nd Maccabees over this, right? Like, these dietary laws were taken incredibly seriously. Same thing, you can't eat hyenas in the old law. You can't drink blood either. All of these things that don't actually correspond to like an evolutionary advantage. Like like you could argue it with shellfish or with swine because those things go off fairly quickly. A camel, no. There's plenty of practical reasons why you'd want to eat camel. Everybody around them drank blood, right? Now, granted, this was part of rituals, and that's why it was prohibited. And you could say, well, that's ethnocentrism, right? But considering then Jesus comes along and says, drink his blood, based on the same principles that the Levitical law actually outright explicitly makes clear. It's like, the life of the animal dwells in the blood, right? Yeah, no, it doesn't, it isn't going to fly. I
mean, if you have to say like, oh well, that's ethnocentrism. Like, I'm sure someone that is into this evolutionary psychology stuff a lot could come up with an explanation for every single Levitical law if they wanted to. The point is that's just massive reaching. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you could find some sort of explanation for all these, but this isn't really the clear explanation.
No, I mean,
it's just because this is the model you want.
In fairness, you could do that, but when it comes to the kosher laws, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. There's no sensible explanation that you can come up with to explain all of the laws, except for a typological one, right? As is made clear in the Epistle of Barnabas, right? There's no evolutionary reason why you wouldn't want to eat a hyena, right? Except that it will be partaking of the food of liars, right? Yeah. Because they have double genitals, the females. Like I mentioned this on the last stream,
Yes.
They have fake male genitalia there, right? They have moral meaning, the eating of the kosher foods. Not like silly evolutionary nonsense. Right, like the amount of places where evolutionism inhabits where it doesn't belong is ridiculous. Another thing as well, right? Why do you put the blue sheet under the bread in the liturgical ceremonies in Numbers 4? Right? Is there an evolutionary reason for that one, Mr. Weinstein, or is it perhaps symbolism? I'm sorry, but evolutionary psychology, I mean, I've always thought it's a bit... Well, ever since I've given it really any thought, I've always thought it's a really meme subject, right? But, it's things like this where it tries to approach religion, which just makes it even more clear.
Yeah, the thing is, they can just, go really easily circular, and it's, so disgusting where they say, well, if it weren't evolutionary, it wouldn't have survived. And it's yeah... Sure, if your model is true, then your model is true, absolutely. But
all right, then why do we have pancreases then? I mean, not pancreases, what they're called, appendixes, right? We don't use that anymore, so it's redundant, there's all kinds of disadvantages. Wouldn't it be advantageous if human beings sprouted wings, right? Wouldn't that be a massive advantage, right?
No, I don't like those arguments at all.
Yeah, okay, whatever. But you can't make everything evolutionary because the world fundamentally is not evolutionary in a holistic sense. You can point out, adaptations over time change things, yes, but does that make the whole world evolutionary? No. Particularly when it comes to social things, it takes a real reach to reduce the Noahide law, the Mosaic laws, to just evolutionary reasoning as if Moses was Darwin or something.
I think the biggest, let's say, argument against these kind of Weinstein takes on Christian thinking and generally evolutionary takes on religion is that these takes always rest upon the idea that evolution was something that was only identified with Darwin and then only really understood afterwards when it was applied to more and more fields.
I mean, Darwin has some really silly takes.
The necessary things they use for their explanations are all things that were known at the time. So, because what Weinstein is really describing is that these are unknown mysteries that have a value that cannot be inferred from them, but that can be, let's say, experienced from them. It's kind of, we do this because we know that it gives us an advantage or makes us survive, even though we don't know why. And those kind of concepts were known at the time. Similarly, evolutionary concepts of, for example, things fitting into their relevant frame or their relevant environment over time were known. And of course, also the whole bloodlines thing where it's, with your ancestry, how you depend on your ancestry and how things are given through an ancestry. Kind of evolutionary traits was known in a basic sense in bloodlines. So all these novel concepts, which they claim that they now have, that people back in the day didn't have to really explain the Bible, fall short when you realize that, no, they had those concepts, but they chose other concepts over them. They had the ability to say, we do not know why we do this, but we do know that this gives us the ability to survive over a long time, so we can hold to that. They had the ability to say that. They had the ability to understand those kinds of concepts. They had the ability to think about it in that way. But they actively chose against that. They said no, because the church fathers, the epistles of Barnabas we're talking about, they say no, these are types. And so they make an active choice against the mystery explanation, which Weinstein kind of advocates for and Rollo kind of advocates for, and in favor of, no, we do understand aspects about these, and these are the things we understand about that. And so we can't say, oh, this is some new knowledge that we're inferring about that, because at its core, all of that knowledge was already known. Sure, it's now integrated into a evolution as a more consolidated, more specified concept, but if that was the meaning of the pure meaning, the best understanding of these texts, then it is unclear why we discover them just now, even though people back then already had the ability to discover this kind of meaning to the text.
Yeah, another thing as well I'd like to add, to further clarify the fact that the world isn't evolutionary. Truth doesn't evolve, being doesn't evolve, beauty doesn't evolve. You've got all of these, mathematics doesn't evolve. 1 + 1 will always be 2. There's no way that can gain in fitness. You have this whole system of mathematics that underlies reality that does not evolve. You can apply it to, you can apply it to biology, arguably, right? Microevolution, yeah, completely clear. Macroevolution, debated, right? Somewhat debated. Although largely taken as a given, right? Other things just doesn't work. Stop trying to apply it to religion. It's just making you look like you haven't actually read the texts.
Yeah.
And of course, Weinstein, as somebody who's Jewish and who should know the Torah pretty well, should be able to see that pretty clearly. But apparently he doesn't.
Yeah. Another thing that on the evolutionary thing, because I think you in the chat I see you making arguments based on the human body, and I have to say, redundant elements to the human body are not arguments against evolution, but one that is always
I'm not arguing against evolution anyway.
One that is always taken for granted, that nobody seems to attack, is the idea that with the question whether or not consciousness actually poses an evolutionary advantage, because we see that beings that have a too strong advantage, we see that with viruses that are too effective, too strong, they are evolutionarily selected against, because they have such a big advantage or such a big effect in the world that they change their environment to which they are involved to. Therefore, they are kind of self-removing. But then you have humanity, which has this massive advantage over any kind of other species. They spread around the globe, and we've been doing so for the last 100,000 years, and we're still around. And you might say, oh, but now there's things coming like climate change, global warming, that kind of stuff. But in the end, I think nobody believes that humanity will lose its position as the dominant species of the planet at any point in the future.
Well, unless we're into the age of Aquarius and the aliens come.
Exactly. So this is the first thing where consciousness goes against evolution, is that it's an advantage, and an evolutionary advantage that is way too big to how evolutionary advantages usually work, where they're usually always kind of buffered against, so that you're not getting, let's say, too strong for your environment. And the other thing is that it's also not clear whether or not it can even be modeled as an evolutionary advantage, because things like being faster, being more efficient in processing your food, all that stuff is kind of, we can see how this gives us an immediate advantage over competition, and in the kind of in the law of the jungle. But the only reason we say that consciousness gives us an evolutionary advantages over all the animals is because humans are so dominant. And this is just circular reasoning. We say this is an evolutionary advantage because if evolution is true, then of course the species that are doing themselves apart over time are the ones that are evolutionarily most fit to their environment, and because humans are most fit for their environment, therefore this is an evolutionary advantage. That's kind of we don't know whether consciousness or not is actually an advantage or not. There are many arguments to be made from a, let's say, completely sober perspective, where you say, well, for example, suicide rates might be linked to being conscious. So as you increase in consciousness, you might increase in being suicidal. Is that an evolutionary
Well, yeah, I mean, like,
advantage?
consciousness created Terry A. Davis. Do you think it was really beneficial to him to develop schizophrenia?
Yeah. So that there is like there is one argument that kind of like questions the idea of evolution in terms of humanity, and that is consciousness, because the only reason for consciousness to be, let's say, defended on evolutionary grounds is the circular reasoning of, well, it's obvious that consciousness gives you an advantage because we can see how dominant humanity is. But yeah, that is circular reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Okay, let's continue anyway.
Yeah.
Also, guys, you should just lack a belief in evolution in an atheist's comment section to see how they react. Just a recommendation. Just see how they react.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a
ideas
similar feeling about geocentrism. Like, I don't know, is it true? I don't know, probably not.
I mean,
But does it
relativistic.
own atheists? Yeah.
I don't know. Like, relativistic physics makes it possible. We just have to adjust the equations slightly,
Yeah.
and it all works.
Yeah.
this secular emotionalism, the gynocentrism that we always have been talking about in the Manosphere forever, in red pill senses and otherwise, is exported, and it is disseminated exponentially. God Sod has a really great book called the Parasite.
Gad's sad. Enough said. All right, let's skip further ahead. Yeah, I actually said my note that I was going to say for it. I wrote in my notes. He actually thinks it'll yeet us rather than those people just simply dying out.
Yeah.
Ah, here's a good one. It's about 4 minutes ahead. We'll go about that'll do.
Her and have the guys feel good about it. He doesn't know what to do because he's an idiot. It's Will Smith, right? And and at the end of it, I'll get you, girl. Like he tried to make up for it, right? But that's a prime example of what I'm talking about. Is you'll accept it as a guy. You'll accept that women are correct. Women are light years closer to God. Women are better, stronger, smarter, faster.
Oh wait, it was a little bit further back. We'll go back. We'll go back to around about here, right? Because he makes like a really interesting point that I want to expound out.
Years ahead of me are light years closer to God than I am. Literally said that. And I thought about that and I go, yeah, there's a lot of people, and especially in old order churches who have this, like, guys get this idea from a gynocentric social order that because they don't emote like women, because they're incorrect men, they don't know how, they're not in touch with their emotions, they can't.
No, women just simply have like this certain spiritual skill that men don't. Like, it's not anything to do with emotions, they're just better at it.
Relate with their wives because their brains aren't wired that way, first of all, or they prioritize reason before emotion. In a gynocentric social order that says follow your heart, feel good, it's all about love, right? It's all about healing, just like Jada Pinkett Smith says. That's okay. She cheated on her husband, and she is essentially cucking her husband, and he's there with this big, sheepish, stupid deer in the headlights grin on because he doesn't know whether to agree with her and have the ladies watching feel good about it, or whether he should challenge her and have the guys feel good about it. He doesn't know what to do because he's an idiot. It's Will Smith, right? And at the end of it, I'll get you, girl. Like he's trying to make up for it, right? But that's a prime example of what I'm talking about. Is you'll accept it as a guy. You'll accept that women are correct. Women are light years closer to God. Women are better.
Okay, maybe he mentioned it a little bit later on.
Better, stronger, smarter, faster. They can kick your ass because every action hero on TV or on the movies says so. And so we have this, and even if it's not true, we have this preconception that it should be true. And women have the preconception that it should be true. And that's what gets them into trouble. But it's that emotional state. It's that why do we like that? Because it feels good. And if women feel good, then it means that I'm a better person because I'm a guy and I don't get her. And so if I can get her, that puts me that much more ahead of the guy, because men are always competing with each other for a piece of ass, one way or the other. They're always thinking
that was it.
about that. It's not just
stop thinking about women, bro. Like this is seriously, like, this is one of the reasons why there's such a problem with intersexual dynamics, because everybody is like a coom addict. Even the people who don't masturbate, like they're constantly entertaining sexual thoughts, and that's stirring up the passions, so they're constantly thinking about women, right? And that leads to the sorts of problems we're talking about here, right? Like, you're not going to be controlled by a woman if you've got like a complete control over your lust, and so you won't be put into this sort of situation. Yeah.
One
Like-
thing he mentions in there that I think we touched on in the last stream, but I would like to repeat in this stream, is that he kind of laments how churches say, "Oh, this woman is closer to God than I am." And this is not a dogmatic position. I don't even think it's a position that is held by all of the Catholic Church. But there are people inside of the Catholic Church who believe that women are born naturally into a higher state of grace than men are. And I think
what does that even
what
mean?
what he's describing there is kind of this bastardization of this kind of teaching, because in that framework you have that women are naturally born into a relatively high state of grace, but have a really really hard time moving upwards, or moving moving into a state of more grace, basically. Yeah, whilst men are born into a relatively lower amount of grace, but have a higher potential to, let's say, move in that direction of grace and to cooperate with graces, and move into a higher state of grace. And the idea is that basically the idea behind the man is to become, and the idea behind the woman is to be. And this is something that was very popular in kind of like late medieval to Renaissance Europe, where it's these ideas you have of the delicate woman especially relate to these kind of ideas, where she is naturally very pure, naturally very close to God. She's not there. She isn't naturally like Mary, full of grace, but she is naturally imbued with a lot of grace. And the man, he starts as a bit more of a wild beast. He starts more removed from grace, but he moves towards grace. And this also kind of explains the idea that I touched upon last time, where by falling in love with a woman, you kind of actualize yourself. You kind of become a more sophisticated, a more real man. And this kind of thinking explained it by basically you want to match her state of grace, where she's a very gracious being already, and then you want to match her idea of grace. Bishop Sheen also kind of alludes to that kind of thinking in his quote, "You can see the state of a civilization by the state of its womanhood," because in this thinking, kind of the grace of a woman is imbued to her by the man, and by the, let's say, by the degree to which she is non-corrupted, and to the degree to which it is given to her by men, like into her in a sense. And kind of as if a woman is a vase that captures an amount of grace that you kind of lay into her as you grow together in marriage. And these kind of ideas are the foundation for things that are now appearing in bastardized form, where it says, "Oh, the woman has more grace than me, therefore she is naturally more holy than me." But she has a way harder way to go up from there. She's just the star that you aim for her in young adulthood, and then you shoot past her, kind of on that same trajectory, and you take her with you, and then together you go into heaven. And I took some time again during the stream to kind of check on are we still married in heaven or not? And I think you guys are right. I think I misread that thing I found there, that you're not together in heaven. But what I misread is that it's the obligation of Catholic couples to get to heaven together, and that being in heaven that kind of like you help one another getting into heaven, as Blessed Karl of Austria said when he married his wife. From this day on, we have to help each other to get into heaven. And yeah, so this is the kind of idea of women having higher grace than men.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty good. Also, Ethelbert mentions in the chat, structured thoughts make sense. Also, actually, before I mention this, don't wind up atheists. It's just occurred to me that it's convenient is sinful. Structured thoughts make sense. Reminds me of the idea that women clustered around the mean, whereas men cluster towards the tails. Perhaps this could apply to virtue, right? Now, I would say it's the inverse. Like, women are either like incredibly pure, or they're like something else. Like they're either like Jezebel or Mary, right? A lot of the time, and there's some in the middle, but not really that many. Whereas men, you don't really it's not really the same, is it? I don't know what you guys think.
I would agree with you. I would say that these two things go hand in hand. It's kind of losing anything. There's this in the gosh, I guess I'd say it in the Netflix show Narcos. I don't know if this is something you want to shout out in your channel, but in the Netflix show Narcos, one of the best quotes is actually them quoting another quote and saying a rich man once described how losing money is. He said, "At first you lose a little, and then everything at once." Losing everything is kind of like that. At first you lose a little, and then you lose everything. And it's also like that with grace. Like at first you start, like sinning here and there, and then your sins kind of go around to add up, and all of them are strengthening the other one, and then you just descend into, into complete viciousness, basically. And I think this is why you see, like, a selection of very pure women who kind of manage to stay away from the corruptions of the world and kind of stay in their natural amount of grace, and even kind of slowly amass more grace onto them. And you see a lot of women that have kind of like fallen down the stairs and are now at the bottom rung somewhere, where they have very, very low amounts of grace, and you very rarely see a woman who's just in the process of falling down the stairs.
Yeah, like she's either already like clearly very like there's something very wrong, or she's like nice. Let's continue.
I'm not saying it's like a cognitive thing. It's just that's how we work. We work in hierarchies. How do I get a leg up? Well, if to get a leg up means that I have to identify more with women, then I'm going to identify more with women. Well, that means you have to get...
Yeah, this is the mindset you want to avoid, right? Because they're basically like they're destroying the rest of their virtue in order to fulfill their coon brain, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. Now, something I'm thinking about right now with his quotes that I touched on in the last video also is he is of course building his mythos for his worldview. And I mentioned in the last time where he kind of starts with the revolution starts with men being men and wanting to get women so they share lay guides on the internet. And here he has the kind of same idea. And I think his like driving force for humanity is kind of like guys will be guys. It's kind of the driving force of humanity. It's like all the evil in the world is around us, but fear not, guys will be guys, and through first unsophisticated things like wanting to get laid, they have all the power in the world to right all the wrongs and say make their ways into heaven. It's kind of the idea of we are shooting for the moon because we really just want to get laid. That this is the driving force, the energy that animates humanity. And of course, this is something that goes contrary to Christianity, when Christianity would say man is constantly moved by a desire to reconnect with the divine. The biggest going against that would of course be the sin of the Antichrist, who kind of finds the divine only within himself, but constantly moving towards the divine, constantly struggling to reach God. Whereas Rollo would say it's like a natural drive. It's like a constantly struggling to get laid and basically constantly struggling to get satisfied. And he laments fields and what you call coom, Elliot. He laments that and how people are always behind that in the new order. But then at the same time, it's his kind of driving factor, his motor for guys. Is what in the end is also coom.
It's not coom. It's coom. Okay. We got to pronounce it differently.
Coom.
Yeah.
Coom.
You got it.
Okay.
No. I mean, like in reference to like the difference between regular coom, which is kind of boring, and then coom, which was what he writes about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. Yes, totally.
I'm just being daft. I haven't got any other notes on anything else, did you?
You have not got any other notes?
No, there's nothing else that really jumped out at me. Like he's like he gets very vulgar towards the end, and there wasn't really anything of value to respond.
Okay. One thing that jumped out to me, but I do not have a timestamp sadly, is that he mentions the movie "It's a Wonderful Life."
Oh yeah,
It's
he
Wonderful
does that.
Life.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
it's one of the best movies of all time. There's a list for that I can uh, put my statement here on. But it's also one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a beautiful old movie. If some of you guys want to watch a very good movie with maybe family, friends, watch It's a Wonderful Life. It's great. I mean, it's very Protestant. It's very Anglo in its thinking. So in the end, all the miracles, all the great things happen at Christmas. That kind of stuff. Its angelology is completely worthless, but it's just there to serve the movie, basically. So don't take any theological statements away from it. The story is about a man. In the beginning, there's like some angels talking about a man who is in the process of taking his own life. And there's one angel who's kind of ordered to take care of that man, and he is shown different moments in the life of that man, going up to his final moment of wanting to kill himself. And one of the themes that carries itself through the movie is that he, at a very young age, starts having this fantasy of seeing the world and of kind of experiencing all that is there to experience. If you want to be facetious, you would say it's kind of the typical white girl dream. It's like all these new experiences. And he wants to go to the Bahamas and to the Fiji Islands and through Europe and all that kind of good jazz. But then throughout his life, he always takes on responsibilities. So he takes over the firm from his father. He gets it through tough times. He marries a girl. He starts a family. All those kind of things. They move into a house together. It's an old, run-down house which they have to reshape from the ground up. And during these taking on of these responsibilities, you see him in the movie. He's tremendously happy, but he never realizes this rationally. He just is happy in the moment. And then once life stops being happy, he kind of starts falling back into his fantasies and starts going, oh man, if this stupid job wasn't here, I would be on the Fiji Islands now. Like, all of this is keeping me from my great dream of seeing the world and experiencing Europe and all that kind of stuff. And Rollo also mentions the movie in his video, and he also says that it's one of his favorite movies, and good on Rollo for that one. And I think he kind of gets it, but he also kind of doesn't, because he says, of course I get the message of the film, but in the end the guy never gets to live. And the entire message of the film is that no, he got to live. He did the right thing. He did not follow up into his fantasies, but he followed up into a proper life. He followed up into responsibilities, and those were the points where he actually got proper happiness. He experienced proper happiness with a wife, with children, with a house and a picket fence, and then in the end he wants to kill himself for various reasons. His job goes belly up, and there's problems with the children, and he's almost broke and has to give this very evil antagonist all of the money and basically the control over the town which they're living in. And so he wants to kill himself, and the angel shows him the world that would be without him. And the entire town is corrupted. The people are living in small, run-down buildings that they can't afford, even though they're completely worthless. All the shops inside the city are not like nice shops anymore. They're like run-down bars where brawny guys kind of punch each other. There's nightclubs, there's casinos, only those kind of milieu things. And all of it is basically horrible. And he is the reason, he is the great man for which this reality didn't come to pass. And so he gets back into his old life, and he kisses his family, he kisses his wife, and he is tremendously happy to have them, because that is the point at which he realizes that the happiness he had was never on the Fiji Islands, in Europe, in the fantasies he kind of made up for himself when life was going tough. All of his happiness was found in the moments where he took responsibilities, in the moments where he was there for his family, in the moments where he was being a proper man. And this is a movie of let's say, life advice that is invaluable, especially for a post-boomer pill generation, which is sold on the idea. I mean, just think about how many people, I don't know if this is the same for you and your audience, but in my YouTube advertisements, there's always some influencer showing up and he goes, look, I'm here on the whatever islands and I can afford this because I do that and that and that. And so the life he advocates for, the life he shows you as desirable, the life he shows you as contented is being, like, experiencing these places, experiencing all these things. And this is what the movie warns against, because these are the kind of fantasies that keep us inside of our heads, that keep us inside of ourselves, that keep us trapped in the moment in the end, instead of living the life that we have around us. And that life that we have around us can be a wonderful life, hence the name of the movie. We just have to see that. We have to see that those fantasies in the end are fantasies. And of course, traveling somewhere, experiencing Bangladesh or something, and being there can be a good experience for a time, but it's not the life that you have. The travel is not the life that you have. The things that have to be wonderful are the lives that you have. And all these other things, they're just kind of a side note, an accident that can be great, that cannot be great. But the life that you have is the one thing that has to be wonderful.
Right, okay. So since I asked for questions in the chat, and I've already answered the one that came along, I'm gonna end the stream now. It's been 2 hours.
Okay. Can I share my channel again?
Yeah, sure. Good.
Okay, I'm Structured Thoughts. I have a very, very small channel filled with hot takes and mediocre editing on YouTube. Check me out. It's a little tree on a yellow background, but I think Elliot will also put it into the description. Thank you, Elliot, for having me here. It was great time, great fun. I think we had a very productive conversation. Yeah, that's Structured Thoughts out.
Settler?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has already subscribed to me because I'm world famous. But if you aren't, go to Settler's Lament. I mostly talk about politics, but I talk about religion sometimes too.
Okay. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later.